Brilliant. So if you could just introduce yourself to me, so if you could say your name, position and your international team.
Rory Underwood, played on the wing and for England.
Brilliant. How did you come to play wing? Was it something you did from a young age?
I first learned to play rugby at the age of 11, and that was at Barnard Castle School up in County Durham, and literally was just introduced to the game. I was fairly quick as a playing sport and doing athletics, and consequently I played on the wing in football. And when they first talked about rugby and said, do you have any preferences for positions, I can remember writing down on this form of a piece of paper, just literally writing down winger.
Brilliant. What is your main job as a winger then?
I think for the winger job, I think it's quite several jobs you could argue as the main ones. In some ways people think of you as the strike force, you actually score the tries. In defence, you're also potentially catching kicks, especially when you're on the blind side wing, and your role with combining with the full back is very pivotal in that context about defence, and also when they're running at you and attacking, it's also you're sort of like potentially the last line of defence, depending on how you and the full back defend wide outside. Ideally you need to have obviously great feet, ability to have pace, or some people use size to physically beat the opposition. There's no doubt that wingers that can score lots of tries and have that ability to sniff out those tries, they tend to be a much more sought after. But you've got to be able to tackle, you've got to be able to catch a high ball, and ideally kick, if nothing else, just to kick off the pitch decent, if not be as good as a fly half.
How does your role as a wing change when there are set pieces? So say if there's a scrum happening or a line out, is there anything differently you do than sort of when there's open play?
Are you talking about defence, or are you talking about attack?
But both actually.
In attack there's no difference, it's whatever the call, because you're controlling the game, so whenever the call is you will just position yourself accordingly. So if you have a scrum, obviously the scrum tends to split the field, so you have backs on either side of the scrum, and so it depends what the call is. If it's going the opposite direction, you know, all you're trying to do there is just potentially just cover around behind. If the ball goes down, then you can potentially go and cover. Line outs, again, you may potentially be coming to the line from the blind side. In defence, there's not that much difference really. What you're trying to get the right balance is, if they're going to run the ball, is trying to judge as to coming up in defence at the right speed and pace, so you're part of the line of the centres, so that you hit the defence, but do it in such a way that if they have over numbers, you can still drift and try and not let them have the advantage. But also potentially you've got to watch out for the case of them just chipping over the top of your head, and so you've got to be aware of them trying to kick over that, which you and the full back are trying to do a team sort of unit.
Okay. How much of playing wing is pace versus strength? Obviously you can't have one without the other. How do you balance the two effectively?
Well, a lot of it's to do with your physiology, and whether you're blessed with the genes that give you a bit of pace. There's a lot of debate around the game nowadays about there's lots of big guys and fast guys. There are not a lot of big and fast guys. There's one or two. Obviously people talk about your John Lomus and they talk about your George Norths. But again, there are quite a lot of big players around that play on the wing, but there's not that many that make it a long time. And even if you think about John Lomu, unfortunately because of an illness, he didn't play, I thought, that long. And George North is still very early in his career at the moment. So you can either have somebody who's very big, who may not be the quickest, but you use his bulk in a way that you can adapt to the game, or use your pace where you give the ball to him and people are going to be dead scared of trying to defend him or her.
You say that obviously there's people who tend to be big or fast, there's harder the combination of both. How much of an advantage could a team gain if a winger's got one and not the other? So say if they've got a winger who's very physically strong but maybe not the quickest, or sort of vice versa? It's
too simplistic to just say, what's the advantage one or t'other, because they've got pros and cons both ways. The real trick is, whichever they are, is as a team are utilising their strength in the best way possible. So consequently, if you've got somebody who's really big and powerful, don't try and put him on the outside and try and make him skin the other winger. You know, utilise him in trying to take the crash balls, or you dummy him and let somebody else score. If you've got somebody quick who ain't the biggest, well then, do you want them to be doing crash balls when they're not the biggest? So, you know, it's horses for courses, and it's still adapting. For me, there's no necessarily perfect ideal winger, because even if you get somebody who's really big and it's really be quick, they're never going to be the quickest, but they're never going to be the biggest, but they're going to be a bit of both, which means that they don't have the benefit of both sides. So it's really utilising your own skills in the best way possible, and also the team utilising your skills in the best way possible.
How much communication is in the back three, so between yourself and the full back?
Loads, has to be. Some of it, if you play together on a regular basis, there's not as much because you can read each other's body language, and there's sort of, they're not processes, they're rules, they're sort of accepted ways of helping out. We always talk about having a rubber band between the winger, the full back and the winger, so as soon as one moves, the other one moves around, so you're constantly like that arc of rubber bands pulling each other around. But when the high ball goes up, whoever's getting the ball, you want the other one trying to be there and support, so you don't get smacked over and knocked over, that somebody's in there straight away. And also, if they want to counter-attack, that they're available. So communication is crucial.
Did wearing a gum shield ever affect your communication with people? No. Short answer. Moving on from that, how was your training regime standards away? Was it, was it mainly very heavily cardiovascular based, lots of sprints?
No, I mean, I come from the day when we were still amateur days, so we trained on, during the midweek. We did a few sprints and various things, but a lot of the time was just doing rugby type stuff. The rest of the time you're trying to pick and choose, times to try and train. While I was in the Air Force, it was very difficult. So I either try to go and do a few sprints out in the car park, or just go for a jog or a run. It wasn't very scientific in those days.
Obviously saying it's not scientific. What was your diet like? Was it sort of,
not very good.
Was this something you maintained yourself rather than have an influence from one of the coaches about?
We didn't have anything like that.
Was there nothing at all?
No.
Oh, fair. Sort of going back then, would you have any ideas how many you say it wasn't particularly controlled? Do you know how many meals you ate a day? Was it just
standard meals. Because I was in the Air Force, I was had breakfast, then I'd fly all day, and if I could grab a sandwich at lunchtime, fantastic, and then there was the meal in the evening, either in the mess or at home. So I had a standard, like everybody else, 3 meals a day, but there was no science in it. I just ate what was in front of me and I fancied. So.
Was there any programme back then to help prevent injuries, sort of around the main areas that rugby players tend to get hurt?
All your questions to do with anything like that? There was nothing.
Nothing. Fair enough. Moving opposite that, how do you play against someone that's sort of physically bigger than you? Say someone who's got 4 or 5 inches in height, or say 15 kilos in weight on you. How do you play against them? Sort of, obviously they're going to try and run through you rather than round you. How do you sort of combat that? Well,
in some ways you know that they're not going to be able to run around you, and in some ways you want them to. So you try and show them the outside, so they try and go for the outside. They tend to be physically bigger and stronger, so they potentially have a much longer, handoff. So if you go in for the tackles, you've got to be very aware of where their arms are and when they're the handoff, so you can try and dip underneath the handoff, so you don't get brushed off. But if they are going to be physical, well, fine. It's in some ways that's easy to tackle because the guy's just going to come straight at you, so you can't miss him. You're just going to make sure you hang on to him. So.
How did you mentally prepare yourself for a game? Just say you was in the changing room before you went out. Was there anything particular you did to yourself? I was
a quiet type. I tended to, because I'm an introvert, so I tend to go quiet and just concentrate my mind, try and clear my mind of all the crap of the week or the day. I didn't worry about the opposition at all. As far as I was concerned, you suspected there was an opposition, then you had to be switched on for anything they could do. But I was trying to clear my own mind and make sure myself ready, so that physically, psychologically, I was ready to take the pitch.
Did you do anything different between club and international level? Was it exactly the same routine?
There was a bit of difference because basically at club level, apart from having one physio, that was all there was. Whereas at international level at the time, we had, a few more guys around, so I could probably have a rub before international match. Basically, I used to, I didn't get changed early. I was always wanted to just chill out. I sometimes just have a close eye on the bench and just close my eyes and just clear my head after I've been on the pitch. And then there was about half an hour, 35 minutes, because this is a time when we didn't go out and do warming up before the game. It was warmed up, was just inside. So about 35 minutes to go. Basically, I would go and have my ankles strapped up. I had my strangles up every single time I played the game. And then once that did, I slowly got changed, got ready in time for the photograph, went out for the photograph, come back in. Once it came big, I was straight back into the physio for a light rub on hamstrings and calves. and at that stage be ready for us getting warm up in the changing room before we went on the pitch.
How much do you think the game has evolved since from sort of when you went to play, sort of in that 15-20 year period?
Massive, huge amount. As you're sort of finding out, there was no strength conditioning, there was no fleet of physios. There's a whole raft of people. We have at Leicester Tiger this mass number of people that are all professional, support medical side of things, and the amount of studying in the game time is happening is massive. And all the coaches are doing, this video type stuff and analysing it and all those sort of things. So, the game now is streets ahead. We had a coach and a physio that turned on match day, and that was it.
Who do you think is the best winger in the world, and what do you think made them so good at what they do?
That's a hard question, because some of the wingers that are around at the moment are just starting out. George North potentially could have a massive impact, but so could Israel Folau, who is a phenomenal athlete, absolutely phenomenal athlete. His inexperience in, he's played international at rugby league, Aussie rules, and now at Australia in 3 different sports within 3 years. It's incredible. And so, there's still early days with some of those wingers. You've got some of the older ones. I'm trying to think of the older ones now. There's been so many changes in the last 2 or 3 years. There's nobody stands out. So those youngsters are the ones that are making the headlines and they're potentially going to stand out. And it goes back to the sense that for you, George North, Israel Folau, you've got big guys who are very skillful with the ball and have got a bit of pace. And those two have got, a fair amount of pace. So it's people getting used to that. And after a while, they'll get used to it. And it's the challenge is always for players to be able to adapt their game, because they can't just stand still. They've got to keep learning and adapting the game to be able to keep improving.
When you was growing up, sort of, as you say, coming into rugby at a young age, was there anyone you sort of looked up to, sort of even relative to your position, or was it someone who stood out?
No, I from the age of 11 I played rugby. It was a sport I played at school, and that was it. We played 1 term rugby at school, and that's all I knew. It wasn't until we got towards, I suppose, 6th form that I really got to know that there was actually 5 nations on at the time. And I used to watch it, but I have no memory, apart from seeing a few games. I've got memory until about the upper 6, when I started being more conscious of the players. And so I was aware of the likes of your Mike Slemons and John Carltons, who were the England wings at the time. So obviously I was aware of them from my position. But I didn't have the same, because in those days, apart from the 5 nations, there was no rugby on TV. There was a thing called Rugby Special, which would be a 45-minute highlights programme from 1 match, and that would be it.
What was it like when you played and when you scored for the British and Irish Lions?
That's a very generic, wide open question. Obviously playing for the Lions is a fantastic experience. I'm very proud to think it's the highlight of my career, without a doubt. You get picked from the best of 4 different countries to play for the Lions, so it's a fantastic experience. And to be able to say that I got 1 try in the 2nd test, it took me 5 tests before I got a try. So I'm pleased I got one, and a very critical one for a game we won against New Zealand.
Brilliant. How was it playing with your brother? Was it easy to play with him since you were brothers? You spent probably.
I get asked that. I get that so many different times, and it's one of these things. I don't know whether it's. I'm not trying to be blasé or whatever, but at the end of the day, he was another player playing on the pitch, and as much as it's great having a brother playing, when you're on the pitch, there's no time for me thinking about that, especially international rugby. But I got used to playing with him at Tigers, so we were playing together at Tigers, and so to go to England. Past the initial euphoria when he got selected, but once we get to training and playing on a pitch, you're down to business.
Fair enough. Well, how do you feel personally being the highest try scorer for England ever? I mean, you're way ahead of the field of anyone else. You're still on, I think you're 3rd on the list of try scorers ever of everyone.
No, well, if you take some Japanese scorers there, they've got 60 odd tries as well, about 4th or 5th now. I don't wander around saying, yay, I'm England's highest try scorer. It's something that people always, whenever I go anywhere and people talk about introducing me, that's what they introduced me for. I was very fortunate to play at the time that we had a successful period of time. We were successful over a long period of time. Played with some great players. I played outside of Will Carling and Jeremy Guscott for quite a number of tests. Great long-term centre parring, the best England probably ever had. So, very lucky to be able to do that in a successful team, to be able to score tries.
Did you understand, sort of, when you were getting towards the old record, that you were possibly going to become the highest try scorer for England?
Well, it wasn't very hard because the try scorer was only 19 at the time. So, you know, but no, I don't. At the time, it's not until you get, oh, you've got 1 to go or 2 to go, because I wasn't aware of the record, and it wasn't until somebody said to me. And in fact, I don't think on that day I knew that I'd beaten it. It wasn't until Bill McLaren on the commentary said that's beaten Jock Lowe's, was it Jock Lowe? I think it was Jock Lowe's England record from 1930, whatever we call it. So, you know.
Do you have a moment from your career that stands out as being the best?
God, flipping it, no chance. I've got so many different memories, and there's not one that necessarily stands out and out above everything else, because I've got so many different memories. You know, you just asked me about the lines. Fantastic! I did 2 lines to us, score a try, win the Test series in '89. It was a great experience. Doing a lap of honour at Sydney Stadium after that 3rd Test. Obviously, 3 Grand Slams. Played in the World Cup final. Scored winning tries. Fantastic experience around the world playing rugby in different countries. You know, there's a whole wealth of different things that have, you know, made me enjoy my career.
Fair enough. Last couple of questions. Was it a very hard decision for you to make when you decided to finally retire?
No, it wasn't. I know I can understand why people think it's a hard decision, because they start sort of trying to convince themselves they don't want to retire. But I mean, I was on a Sunday morning. I was spending about half an hour in the morning after getting out of bed trying to get my ankles loosened off after a game on a Saturday. You know, your body's getting older, and your knocks and bangs are starting to become harder, you know. So you start to know. And also because when I retired in '99, the game was starting to really, you know, it was 2-3 years into professionalism, and it was starting to kick off. People were starting to do full-time, because there was a mixture still in those days, going more and more full-time. I was still in the Royal Air Force. I couldn't, you know, do that. So consequently, it's sort of, you know, sad, and you don't want to, and you love the game, you'll miss it and that sort of stuff. However, you know, needs must.
Brilliant. Last question. You are described as possibly the finest winger to ever play the match. You know, you were known for being just as quick with ball in hand as you were without. How do you react to someone saying that to you? You know, that people hold you in that high regard? Well,
obviously, you know, it makes you feel very proud of what you accomplish as a player. I'm very modest sort of guy, so I'm not one to sort of, you know, I feel good about it and whatever, but I sort of blush slightly and thank people and whatever. But you know, the game is. The game keeps evolving. The game's massively evolved in the last 15 years with professionalism. The exposure that people have now compared to when I was playing. And even when I was playing, there was still no club rugby being shown on a Saturday afternoon, and now you've got 7 matches on a weekend when European rugby's on Sky. So we didn't have anywhere near the same exposure as they do now. And so there are more people out there watching the game, aware of what's going on, aware of all the different players than they were when we played, and it was only what they saw playing for England. So no, it's, you know, yeah, it is very flattering, you know, that people will say those sort of things. But like anything, I think my mother, wife, and kids will always make sure that my feet are on the ground.